The following program is to provide entertainment and information. It is not considered to be any legal or investment advice.
Congratulations on your decision to retire. Two things that we have to care about when monitoring the Appraisal Foundation are issues of transparency, issues of conflicts of interest, and issues of governance and leadership. You have played no role in the selection of your successor. No role, no role, no role.
Well, Mr. Miller does have a challenge with the truth. Often. Well, Mr. Miller does have a challenge with the truth. Often. Mr. Miller does have a challenge with the truth. Often. A challenge with the truth. Often. 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 Often.
Good morning, appraisers. Let's talk some real estate. You're listening to the voice of Appraisal, the #1 appraisal podcast in all of the universe that always brings you the latest news and information from the front lines of the real estate market. Anything from market conditions, appraisal regulations, cryptocurrencies, big bank news. Folks, if you have a question, we have all of your answers. We are the one-stop source for all of your real estate appraisal information needs. If you want to be in the know, you have definitely tuned in to the right show. I'm your host, Phil Crawford. Happy to have all of you here with us today. Kevin, how are you, my friend? How are you?
I'm doing good. Hey, doesn't it feel like 2024 is turning number 4?
The fourth turning. The fourth turning is taking place in 2024. It is the fourth turning. Yes, Kevin, exactly right. The fourth turning of the National Association of Realtors, the fourth turning of the Appraisal Foundation. All is hitting a fan and everything is crumbling down. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't heard, the National Association of Realtors just a couple days ago settled out their lawsuit, the Zitzer-Burnett case lawsuit, for $418 million, which actually is not a lot of money considering the fact they have 1.6 million members, but there is going to be some massive changes in the organized real estate world, and you guys need to stay up on top of this. It's going to be a really big show. Lots of data, lots of information flying your way. If you're driving, pull over and grab a notebook and a pen because we're going to have to share a lot of things with you today, okay? First things first, I want to throw this out there. I want all of you to write this down. This is an excellent podcast. The podcast is called Industry Relations. It's the Industry Relations Podcast with Rob Hahn and Greg Robertson. The Industry Relations Podcast with Rob Hahn and Greg Robertson. They do a phenomenal job breaking down what is going on with the National Association of Realtors. They've been on Zitzer-Burnett really since this time last year, and they made the call that Zitzer-Burnett would go against the National Association of Realtors, which they were right. So they've been right on it.
All the realtors said they were full of shit.
They were full of shit, right, and they were right on it. They were right on it. The only thing is that I think that Rob always said that the National Association of Realtors would be dead in 18 months. Now he's saying it's not going to be, but I don't know. With this whole situation, we have no idea what's going to happen with N.A.R. They release a show about every 2 weeks, so I watch it on a regular basis, and that's really good data for what's going on in Zitzer-Burnett. I'm going to talk a little bit about Zitzer-Burnett during this show today, especially when it comes to how this lawsuit settlement is going to impact appraisers. You're going to see a lot of YouTubes out there about how it's impacting the businesses for the real estate agents, but you don't hear a lot about the appraiser side. So I'm going to talk about the appraiser side a little bit as well. We're going to get into a new segment of the show. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then we're going to get into the fourth turning of the Aero Conference. Okay, so if you are a regulator, you need to be listening to this show today. It's going to be very important. You need to write down a lot of the stuff that we're talking about because there's going to be a fourth turning coming your way if you don't watch it. Okay, so we're going to talk about that, the Aero Conference, all of these things. And then finally, I'm probably going to get into my commercial conspiracy theory, what I think is going to happen to commercial real estate in 2024 and 2025. There's been a lot of conspiracy theories out there. I'm going to give you mine personally. It could happen. It could not happen, but I don't know. So big, huge show. Let's get ready. Let's just break it down because now, Kevin, now is the premiere of the special new segment that we have on the Voice of Appraisal podcast. It's called You and Me in the Big Fannie, Kevin. You and Me in the Big Fannie. Yes, this is the segment of the show. We go deep. We go really, really, really deep into the bowels of the Big Fannie to find the data that no appraiser, that no mover or shaker or policymaker has ever seen before. This is the data that we need to find out if there's any Big Fannie juice in the market today. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we need from the Big Fannie. Big Fannie, if you're listening to me, if you're listening to me, this is the data and information that we need. We need, as real estate appraisers, all of the addresses. All of the addresses that you guys put purchase waivers on from 2020 to present time. From 2020 to present day, I need all of the addresses for the purchase waivers. Now remember, because of this special segment of you and me and the Big Fannie, I've called Jonathan Miller this week. And I said, Jonathan, if Fannie Mae gives us this information, will you break it down? Will you take it through the market reports? Because he is the most highly visible appraiser in the world today, and he's right often, Kevin, often. He's right often. That's right, Kevin, that's right. So we're going to run all this data and information that we get from Fannie Mae, give it over to Jonathan, and he's going to break it down. Okay, so what we need is, like I said, all the purchase waiver addresses from 2020 to 2024. We're going to put them on a grid. We're going to break them down per neighborhood, and we're going to see if those purchase waivers that you guys put out there juiced any of the markets. Did they create those special comparable sales that made the market go up, that drove prices completely out of control in this country? That's why in Hamilton County, Ohio here, I've got elderly people on fixed income worried about either paying their property taxes or paying their grocery bill. So I need to make sure that they don't have some of that Big Fannie juice in our market. Is there a data cancer in the body economic of the real estate world? Okay, so we need to have that information also. Also, this is something that's very important too. This is really important, okay? Now, this is going to be a little tricky, okay? Going to be a little tricky. Big Fannie, I need you to do this. I need you to pull up all the data and information that you have on historically redlined neighborhoods in America. And then I need you to pull up all the data that you have on rural underserved areas in the country. I need historically redlined neighborhoods, and I need rural underserved areas. And I want you to release the average CU score on the appraisals in those neighborhoods. Historically redlined, underserved rural. I want the average CU score. Then I want you to give me the average CU score of neighborhoods around these specific areas. So what I want to see is I want to see what the 2.5 to keep it alive is doing over at Fannie Mae. I want to know if that collateral underwriter is coming in below 2.5 in historically redlined neighborhoods or rural underserved, or I want to see if that CU score is coming in above. I want to see where that CU score is coming in. So anything above 2.5 is considered to be a risky appraisal. So if it's 2.5 and below, well, it's not so risky. If it's 2.5 or higher, it's risky. So I want to see what that average CU score is in the Fannie Mae system in historically redlined neighborhoods and rural underserved. That's going to tell me a lot about how that system works, and is there any systemic bias inside of that CU system? So that's what I need. That's what I need from Fannie Mae. You and me and the Big Fannie. This is a Big Fannie data colonoscopy. That's exactly what this is, ladies and gentlemen. This is a new segment. Now, about every 2 or 3 shows, we're going to come out with this segment. We're going to ask some very specific questions from Fannie Mae. And again, all the data that's going to be given to me, info@voiceofappraisal.com, I will send right over to Jonathan Miller. He's right often. Very often. Often. He is right often. We're going to send the data over to him, and he's going to break it down, and we're going to find out if there's anything going on inside. Is there any Big Fannie juice? Is there any big systemic bias inside of that CU underwriter over there at the Big Fannie? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so this collateral underwriter scoring system could be as controversial as the FICO score when it comes to credit scoring. If we can just get this data out a little bit from the Big Fannie, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. You know, if there's no Big Fannie juice out there, there's no Big Fannie juice. I guess I give it to Jonathan Miller, and he can call me up and say, Phil, there's no juice. There's no juice out there. But if there is juice, I want to see where it's at. If there is a systemic bias built into the collateral underwriter system, I think it's important as real estate appraisers that we root that out to make sure that doesn't impact the general public. We're here for the public trust. That's what we're here to do. Okay, so let's get into this National Association of Realtors settlement. For those of you that don't know, Zitzer Burnett, it was a big class action lawsuit where basically the realtors were sued because the seller was being forced to pay the buyer's commission. That was considered to be, antitrust. It was considered to be steering. That was like the whole key to the lawsuit was steering. So now the National Association of Realtors has settled out that case. It was literally like $2 billion. I mean, it was massive. They settled out the case at $418 million, which is not a lot when it comes down to like $275 per member. And I think they have like 3 or 4 years to pay it off, okay? Now, again, the Justice Department has not approved of this, but I have a hard time thinking that the Justice Department didn't okay this settlement before it went out, okay? So from now on, the MLSs all the multiple listing services will not be able to put on there the compensation of the seller's agent or the buyer's agent. So that's not allowed anymore. So what's going to end up happening is the buyers and sellers agents are going to have to start working together and communicating together to try to figure out how this deal is going to work, who's going to be compensated what, where that compensation is going to come from, all of these things. There's pluses and minuses to this whole thing. I think at first glance, this is going to be some harm to the buyer's representation, the buyer's agent. If you're out there and you're an excellent listing agent and you're getting tons of listings, I don't think you're going to be working for less. You're not going to be working for 3%. You're probably going to be working for just a flat fee, because that's exactly what the messaging from the mainstream media is that you are overpaid. You are paid too much. You don't deserve your 3% half. So I see a lot of flat fee pricing out there going forward. So realtors are not going to make the money that they used to make ever again. I don't think that's going to happen ever again. But I think the buyer's agents are going to get hurt the most in this whole situation. And I think we're going to lose a lot of agents and obviously a lot of realtors because of this whole situation. So I foresee the National Association of Realtors maybe staying in business, not going bankrupt, but losing probably 500,000 members, going back to the numbers that they used to have prior to the coronavirus. So what are we going to see? What are we going to see as real estate appraisers? Because I've been doing this for 25 years, and I know the shenanigans of the organized real estate, and I know the shenanigans of the realtors, and you're going to run into a lot of them, and they're going to try to find ways, lucrative ways, creative ways to get paid from buyers moving forward. In my personal opinion, I think we're going to have many more pocket listings than we had before. So remember, on local MLS services, there will be no commission. So I think that you're going to have a lot more, you're going to have agents working together, working the deals together, the buyer and the seller and the buyer, but they're going to work an off MLS deal, and there's going to be more and more pocket listings. And those sales actually may not make it to the local MLS. I think a lot of these MLS data services are going to deteriorate over the course of the next 12 months. So you're, as a real estate appraisers, you can't rely heavily on the MLS system. Now, Kevin and I, we know how that works in Cincinnati because Rapatoni was crushed and destroyed last year in the fourth quarter, right? So we understand how that works. But for those of you that are very, very data-driven on the MLS system and not courthouse and not off-market and not developing your own databases, I think you're going to be a little late to the game as far as producing credible results, okay? So it's very important that you start to develop your own databases moving forward right now, because I think some of this activity is not going to be on the MLS. That's the first thing. The second thing is, remember, all of the big companies like Zillow and their Zestimates and everything, they pull information from these MLS systems. So if the MLS data starts to corrupt and it's not as accurate as it needs to be, then I really see these guys taking a hit. As a matter of fact, on Friday, when the news came out about the N.A.R. settlement, Zillow was down like 14%. Their stock price dropped 14% overnight. That's a big deal. So for real estate appraisers, the Zestimate sucks anyways. It will continue to suck, and it will probably get even more suckier as time goes on. Also, really keep an eye on your concessions moving forward. The concessions inside of the sales contracts that you guys review, because I think, how do I put this? There could be some shenanigans inside of the concession part of these contracts. So really keep a close eye on concessions going through 2024 and 2025. And then also the big one, of course, is how in the hell are we going to pay a buyer's agent or get the buyer's agent paid when the buyer barely has enough money to buy the house to begin with? That's the big thing. So what I see happening, and this is going to be tough, all right, this is going to be really, really tough, is I see buyer's agent, seller's agent getting together saying, listen, we think that the market value is $400,000. We write a contract for $400,000. The seller's agent says, I'm already covered. I'm getting my fee, my percentage, whatever it is. So how the hell are we going to pay this buyer's agent? Okay, well, this buyer's agent, I'm going to tell you right now, isn't going to get 2%. This buyer's agent isn't going to get 3%. This buyer's agent is going to get a flat fee. That's what I think is going to happen. They're going to get a flat fee. And they're going to take that flat fee on this $400,000 sales contract, and they're going to add it to it. They used to do that prior to the collapse in 2008. They used to add the concession to the sales contract, jack the sales contract up.
Right.
So if they add that on, if they add that commission amount or they add that fee onto the purchase price, but it doesn't appraise. So if it doesn't appraise, who are they going to come to? Who are they going to scream at? They're going to come back and scream at you. Which agent's going to scream at you? The buyer's agent.
Right.
But the buyer's agent's supposed to be there representing the buyer to make sure they get the best deal, right? So they're going to come back and bitch at you and say you didn't appraise it high enough. It's worth more, it's worth more, it's worth more because I got to get paid. I've got to get paid. The reconsiderations of value, they're going to take place when it comes to these sales contracts that are juiced up to try to cover the buyer's agent's part of it is going to be ridiculous. I think that's coming. I think that's something that appraisers need to look out for. Buyer's agents, if you call up an appraiser in the state of Ohio and you intimidate us, you instruct us, you threaten us when we're doing an appraisal for the purpose of the repayment of a mortgage loan, you're committing a fifth-degree felony charge.
I was going to say they got to talk to Johnny Law.
They got to talk to the law on that one. That's exactly right. So you're not going to get paid and you're breaking the law. Rethink your life. Things are going to change a lot. And this is going to be serious. I mean, this is going to be back in the days where you're going to have to hustle. There is not going to be any part-time agents anymore. You're going to have to hustle. When your phone goes off and you don't answer that phone within 2 rings, you go broke. You go broke. You're going to have to go to Glengarry Glen Ross. Just Google it. Glengarry Glen Ross. Go to Alec Baldwin's monologue. Watch that thing 3 times over again. You're going to get offended. You're going to get pissed off, but that's real estate. That's what's real estate when my grandfather was in the business. That was real estate when my dad was in the business. That was real estate all before this bull. That's how real estate works. You got to get out there and you got to hustle it. The days of you sleeping in till 10:30 and then going over to some seminar, some happy, joy want to come bang each other and some sailor want to come hump bar, those days are over with. And then you go and get your mocha frappuccino and then you take a little swim and then by 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you're making phone calls. It's not going to happen. Or you're working another job and you don't make a phone call back to somebody until 5 o'clock when you get off the other job. That's not going to happen. We're probably going to lose a lot of real estate agents. And for the top producers out there, the ones that have been doing this, you can get in here and you can hustle and you can make yourself a good living in real estate. These are going to be some very interesting times. Matter of fact, if you remember, during the Super Bowl commercial, Homes.com, the Homes.com Super Bowl commercial was designed for this lawsuit and this settlement. We've done your homework. Homes.com. We've done your homework. That's what they're designed to do. They're designed to come in with different platforms, bring the cost of the transaction down.
Here's the question then. With the MLS changing,
yes,
as you say, is coming around, getting ready to happen, do you think the MLS will just eventually completely go away?
No, I think it just won't be as good. The data source just won't be as good, which will kill appraisal modernization. See, appraisal modernization, the bifurcators, the chronic bifurcators, and the people that go out to the houses and stuff like that, the inspectors, that's all based on solid MLS data. So if you've got a data collector going out there and collecting data and giving it to a $25 an hour valuation analyst, but the valuation analyst is data blind and doesn't know how much data cancer is in the data that the data collector is collecting and giving to the valuation analyst, and they're data blind, it's just going to be a big and swag, a scientific, wild-ass guess, and that's all it's going to be. And that's going to kill appraisal modernization.
Is that Fannie juice?
Fannie juice. Well, that's not even Fannie juice. That's just you're just pulling a number out of your ass is what it is. It's just ass juice. I mean, this is like liquid bottled ass juice is what that is. It's not even Fannie juice. This entire movement into appraisal modernization. This is what Zillow pulls. This is what all of these big companies pulls to have the desktop appraisal done, have the valuation analyst done. If you don't have a local real estate appraiser that's on the ball, that's talking to agents all day long, that has the data sets, that has the data services, that has the confidential settlement statements, you don't have a good product. The intelligent and hardworking appraisers in this world are going to be just fine. The lazy are going to retire, and that's just the way it is.
Last question on this topic for you.
Yes.
With the appraisers now onto the appraiser side, do you think that this is the death of the desktop appraisal where you're actually going to have to go out to the property now?
I think that if it's the death of the concept of a bifurcated person never seeing the property, and really if they don't have the data set developed themselves, then the valuation will be off. It will be incorrect. So we're just going back to the old-fashioned days. It wouldn't surprise me tomorrow if CoreLogic or First American came out with the PaceNet product again.
I think it was First American.
Yeah, First American. They had the PaceNet product, so it would pull everything from the courthouse and things like that. It could come back to that because we're just not going to be so data dependent on these MLS systems because the realtors are going to be working deals. They're going to be working deals here, they're going to be working deals there, and some of the isn't going to hit the MLS. Remember, the MLS systems right now in the country, a lot of them require you to be a realtor to join the MLS. That's over with. You just have to be a salesperson to join the multiple listing service. Also, the other thing I see is this is what's called the antitrust squeeze. Okay, this one's going to be tough. Yeah. Okay, remember a lot of these agents are young, so they don't remember.
Right.
They don't remember the year I was born, 1974, in September of 1974, that was a Congressional Country Club. That was a Foley case. You can go back to one of my shows called Mr. Foley and the Three Little Bears, and we break that down pretty well. But remember, if you guys think that you're going to start like a little forum or a little Facebook group where you're going to put on there the commissions given to buyer's agents, and you're going to say, well, on this property, we're offering 3% to the buyer's agent. On this property, we're offering 2% because we can't put on MLS. And then as soon as the 1% person goes on there, then everybody's going to be bitching about it and screaming and hollering about it. And then they're going to say, well, we're not going to show that listing because it's at 1%. So screw him. That's the steering part, right? That's the antitrust part.
Right.
But then they're going to be colluding with each other to try to figure out, well, who's going to show what listing, and then they're going to be yelling at each other because why'd you put it out there at only 2%? Why'd you put it out there at 1%? Which is exactly the same thing that the Foleys did back in 1974. So you're going to start to see this. It's called the antitrust squeeze. When you squeeze the money out of people, when you squeeze the money out of their profession, they start committing antitrust crimes and violations. And that's what is probably going to happen as well.
And look how it turned out for them.
Oh, no. Foley Foley melted down in court. And he spent, I don't know how long he spent in jail. It took 10 years. 10 years. You don't want to have the FTC looking at you. And speaking of the FTC, now this is where we go into the next segment of the show. Speaking of the FTC, there was at one time a man by the name of Rohit Chopra. And he sat on the FTC. He was actually appointed to the FTC by President Donald J. Trump. Now, Rohit just grilled King David the Button a couple of weeks ago for the OCC appraisal biased hearing. It was the fourth one where he destroyed the Appraisal Foundation. He brought the Appraisal Foundation to its fourth turning. So the National Association of Realtors has been brought to its fourth turning. The Appraisal Foundation has been brought to its fourth turning. And the CFPB, with the leadership of Rohit Chopra, appears to be taking a much, much more active role when it comes to the ASC, the Appraisal Subcommittee, and how it monitors the Appraisal Foundation. And what does the ASC do? We have a little problem now. So if you are a regulator, I need you to listen to this, okay? This is really serious, all right? The regulators that regulate the appraisers across the country get together twice a year at what is known as the ARO Conference. It's called the ARO Conference. There's 2 of them a year. All of the regulators get together. All of the regulators talk about what they need to talk about when regulating, are you ready for this? 30,000 professionals. Now, you have to understand something here. When you want to talk about an over-regulated population, I know there's like 80,000 appraisers. Only 30,000 do the work.
Wow.
Only 30,000. So you've got 2 conferences, the Summit and the Expo. That's where Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac come in and tell you what to do. Then you've got 2 of these ARO conferences. That's when they get together and regulate you. Then you've got all of the different meetings that the Appraisal Foundation does. Okay, they go to all of these exotic locations to have their meetings to tell the appraisers what to do. This is what is known as over-regulation, okay,
Yeah.
in a big way. And this is what's going on with ARO. Now, here's the problem with it. ARO has sponsors. Sometimes the sponsors that ARO has are the people that they regulate. Now, what do you think is going to happen when Rohit Chopra finds out about that shit? You just saw what happened to Dave Button.
Oh, wow.
You just saw what happened to King David. What do you think is going to happen to all of you regulators when Rohit Chopra shows up at an ARO conference? I think it's time that we need to play a game. Okay, Kevin, we're going to play a game. We're going to play a role-playing game. I want to role-play what would happen if Rohit Chopra walked into an ARO conference. Okay, so I want you to play a past ARO president, okay, because you're pale, stale, middle-aged male, which most likely that's what a past president looks like, okay? So I want you to be the past president of ARO, and I'm going to play Rohit Chopra. I'm going to play Rohit Chopra. So here we go, and it's going to be like a hearing, just like what happened to King David the Button, and I'm going to ask you some questions being a prior president of the ARO conference, okay? So here we go. Mr. President, thank you very much for being here. And I want to thank everybody that's sitting on the panel today for all of their great questions. Mr. President, we need to ask you a question about the ARO conference and the ARO meetings. Let me ask you this. Do you know of anything called the Riva Room? The Riva Room. I'm talking about the Riva Room. Have you ever been in the Riva Room?
Well,
We meaning you. You're talking about you were in the Riva Room? You were in the Riva Room at that time, is that right? Is Riva a sponsor? Has Riva ever sponsored the ARO conference? I need to ask you another question, Mr. President. To become a sponsor of ARO, do you ever have to accept money from the sponsors?
Well,
We meaning you. We meaning you. We're talking about you. Did you accept money from the sponsors in the Riva room at the Aero conference? When you were inside of the Riva room, Mr. President, let me ask you another question. This is very, very important. When you were inside of the Riva room, did you discuss any junk fees? Did you discuss any junk fees inside the Riva room? Did you have any conversations about junk fees inside the Riva room?
Well, me
meaning you. We're talking about we meaning you. You were inside the Riva room discussing junk fees at that time in the Aero conference. Am I right about that?
Well,
Was anybody in the room from the FTC, the OCC, or the CFPB? Was anybody in the Riva room at that time? Were you accepting money from sponsors? Were you accepting money from people that you regulated inside of the Riva room? Please answer the question. We meaning you? You keep saying we. Do you mean you? When you say we, do you mean you? That's what I'm asking a question right now. Do you mean you? I think I think he's having a heart attack. Let him fall down. Come in, paddle him hard, because I have more questions to ask him. Thank you very much for your time. That's what would happen if Rohit Chopra ever walked into an Aero conference in the position that he's in now, where it looks like he's basically taking control of the ASC at this time. There's an Aero conference coming up in May of this year. I highly recommend you turn this whole thing into a quarterly Zoom call. Turn it into a quarterly Zoom call with no sponsors. What did Rohit Chopra do to King David DeButton when it came to the Appraisal Foundation's sponsor situation?
There are sponsors.
We no longer have sponsors.
Okay.
We did away with that.
Okay.
There
are sponsors.
We no longer have sponsors.
Okay.
We did away with that.
Okay. There are sponsors.
We no longer have sponsors.
Okay.
We did away with that.
Okay.
We did away with that.
Okay.
We did away with that.
Okay.
So there you go. So you did away with your sponsors. The sponsors that were inside the Riva room. Is that what it was? You were inside the Riva room. Here's the situation. What happened in this hearing was complete and absolute vindication for the Voice of Appraisal podcast, which is not just me. The Voice of Appraisal podcast is Lori Noble. The Voice of Appraisal podcast is all of you that give me information on a regular basis. I'm just supplying the voice. That's all it is. That's the podcast. So this is complete vindication for VOA. It's complete vindication for Jonathan Miller's warning after warning after warning to the Appraisal Foundation. And it's complete vindication for Jeremy Baggett's The Dispatches of the Cosmic Cobra Breeding Farm, the #1 book. Jeremy Baggett, a national treasure in this country today. This is absolute vindication for everything that we've been warning the Appraisal Foundation for. And now let me tell you, if you're on Aero and you're a regulator, and I like some of you, but some of you are really nice, and I like you, okay? But if you think that you're going to get away with the Aero conference in the way it's set up, in the way it's positioned, without a severe conflict of interest issue, you got your head up your ass. You got your head up your Big Fannie with all of its juice. Shut it down. Shut down the Aero conference. Turn it into some quarterly Zoom call where you have your investigator training. You can bring in the FBI. The FBI can tell you how people are committing mortgage fraud and all that stuff. Do that. You heard the way that Rohit Chopra destroyed Dave Bunton and destroyed Michelle Bradley when it came to their conflict of interest issues. They didn't match anything that has to do with the federal conflict of interest laws. Do you have that going on in Aero? Listen, I like some of you guys. I'm not kidding you. I like some of you guys. The regulators that are in West Virginia, like Dean Dawson, the regulators that are out there in South Dakota that took out Cassidy Peters, jerks, okay? The regulators that Mike Brunson had to deal with out there in Nevada, who he won, we kicked their ass, fucking evil people, all right? But there's some really good people in the regulatory space, and again, heed my warning. I mean, you saw what happened here. King David DeButton was a Teflon Don. He walked through the raindrops, and Rohit Chopra turned him into fucking Elmer Fudd, for crying out loud. That's it. Shut that Aero conference down. Otherwise, you will be in your fourth turning, just like the Appraisal Foundation and just like the National Association of Realtors. Also, Rohit Chopra is out there. Now, remember, he's in charge of the CFPB. He's actively looking into these junk fees. He's looking into them, and I'm telling you, the appraisal management companies, that's on his radar. Those junk fees are on his radar. Now, for those of you that don't know, Riva, when I say the Riva room, Riva is the lobbying group for the appraisal management companies. Okay, so I used to call it Vatican City of the AMC religion, right? The corporate appraisal propaganda religion. And if they find out that these regulators are taking money from Riva or have taken money from Riva, and Riva is one of the top junk fee producers in the mortgage space, listen, this podcast is a very select audience. It's not for the masses. It just goes to the people that are in the know. And you might want to hear it from me before you're on CNN and Fox News the next day. I'm serious. Because you saw what happened in South Dakota. You guys can get on CNN and Fox News just like that. I mean, just like that. It can happen. I would shut it down. So, Kevin, we're not going to have time for the commercial conspiracy. I got off a little bit. I was having too much fun playing Rohit Chopra today. But again, the big thing today is the fourth turning. The fourth turning of the Appraisal Foundation, the fourth turning of the National Association of Realtors. There's going to be a lot of fourth turnings in 2024. 2024, the turning number 4. Let's see what happens. It's going to be a wild ride. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our show for this week, and as always, I would like to thank you for listening as we journey through the mysteries and complexities that are, in fact, the real estate appraisal business. I would like to thank my producer, Kevin Kinney, for being here, for his thoughtful insight and knowledge, and nice role-playing, Kevin. Nice role-playing. God willing, we'll be back here very soon, continuing to report from the front lines of the real estate market. In the meantime, you kiss your spouse, you hug your children, enjoy your day, be safe in the field. You've been listening to Phil Crawford on Voice of Appraisal. We'll talk very soon.
There are sponsors.
We no longer have sponsors. We
Okay.
did away with that.